यही है ना? Hello. A very good evening to one and all gathered here. We, the team of Extramural Lectures, IIT Madras, welcome you to the lecture, The Publishing Paradox, Crafting Stories in the Age of AI and Algorithms. I humbly request the audience to keep their mobile phones on silent mode to avoid any disturbances. Today, we have with us Mr. Davidar, a distinguished novelist and publisher who has held key positions as the CEO and publisher at Penguin India, Penguin Canada, Penguin International, and Pearson. He founded Aleph Book Company in 2011 in collaboration with Rupa Publications, a preeminent publishing house that publishes literary fiction and quality non-fiction. As an accomplished writer and co-founder of this premier publishing house, the Aleph Book Company, David Davidar is one of the foremost contributors to the literary milieu of the country. In a career that spans over 4 decades, he has beast-ridden the worlds of journalism and publishing with equal finesse, while being an acclaimed writer himself. His novels draw on our country's rich history and offer unique insights based on his experiences as a journalist and publisher. In his time at Penguin and Aleph, he has published some of the greatest pioneering works of our time and, at the same time, provided opportunities for new authors to emerge and hold the country and indeed the entire world in thrall. I now invite Dean of Students, Professor Satyanarayan N. Gummadi, onto the stage to present our esteemed guest David Davidar with the Angavastram.
We once again welcome Mr. David Davidar to the EML lecture series. It's an honor to host you, sir. I'm sure the audience is very excited to hear from you. So without further ado, let's begin the questions. Sir, it's been almost 14 years since you founded the publishing house Aleph Book Company. Can you provide us insights on some of the highlights of your experiences as a co-founder at Aleph Book Company? What does it take, in your opinion, to find and run a successful publishing house?
Is this working? Can you hear me? How about now? Yeah. Well, I think you start with the fact that in order to run a successful publishing house, you need to have good writers. And India has many excellent writers. There are also many publishing companies. So I think what we decided was the big opportunity in India, and I'll give you an example to illustrate this, was that while India publishes something like 100,000 books a year, most of these are textbooks, we felt that for the general reader, which is what we don't do textbooks, the opportunity lay in publishing books that had never been written before about particular Indian experiences. I came to Chennai 3 days ago to launch a book that we published 3 days ago called The Tamils. Now, we live in Tamil Nadu, and I'm sure there are a lot of Tamils here, but there had never been a book that actually talked about the Tamil experience. So, when we published the book, it immediately became a bestseller. And this is the 4th book in a series. The first book was on Bengalis, second book was on Assamese, third book was on it escapes me for the time, was on Gujaratis, and now Tamils. So that is what we do. We look for opportunities of books that have never been published before, and we go out and find writers and publish these books, and they find an audience. That, I think, is the cornerstone of our success. We try to publish books that have never been published before about very particular Indian experiences.
Sir, also in your career, you have been a journalist, then an author, and then a publisher. Did these careers have an influence on each other? If yes, how did those adventures shape you as a person you are today?
Well, I became a journalist by accident because I didn't know what else to do with my life, to be honest. I went to Bombay and that was the only job that was given to me. I applied to engineering institutes. I tried everything, hotels, etc., and I finally got a job as a journalist. And I'd always liked language and books and the shaping of language. So that helped me. And my first boss was actually a grandson of Mahatma Gandhi called Rajmohan Gandhi. So I got very lucky in being mentored by somebody who was a very famous journalist himself. Then, at some point, I decided that journalism was not for me, and I went off to America to study publishing. And I happened to meet the chairman of Penguin there, and he said to me, I was the only Indian in the class, and he said, how would you like to go back to India and help set up a company? Now, I'd never done a publishing job in my life, but it seemed to me like, why not? Who would say no to such an offer, right? So this, all these illustrate a pet theory of mine, and all of you are going to experience this in your life because you're at a stage where you're learning and where you will have to make a career for yourself. I think all of us get 2 or 3 lucky breaks in our life. It doesn't matter what your education is, where you come from, but you get 2 or 3 lucky breaks. The trick, I think, is to recognize these as the breaks that are going to make or break your life, literally, and then capitalize on them. A lot of people don't recognize these opportunities when they come their way, and then they find that their life becomes mediocre or not it's not a great shining kind of career ahead of them. So that's what happened to me. I had 2 or 3 breaks and I managed to capitalize on them. So that's how I was a journalist first, then I was a publisher. I was actually a failed author. I wrote my first novel when I was 19 years old. Nobody wanted to publish it. So I think all of you will find that if you want to be writers, that you will face rejection, you will face kind of indifference, but you need to persist. And that applies to everything. I'm talking about novels, but it could be anything else. So that kind of was the foundation of my career.
Thank you, sir. That was very inspiring. So with the advent of generative AI, how do you think the role of an author and a publisher changed over the years?
Okay, let's not forget that AI is not new. It's been around for decades. So it goes up and down. People get very excited by it, and it finds application in some industries, and then it doesn't work out in other places, and people move on. Now, here's what I think about AI. The first thing is, and where it applies to the kind of things that I know about, which is writing and publishing books. I think the fact that people have tried large language models like ChatGPT and others, they've tried to kind of see whether they can write great novels. They've all failed. They say, write a novel like War and Peace in the style of Tolstoy. So after the first few sentences, it degenerates into gibberish. Why is that? Because AI is only able to generate what you feed into it. Now, if you talk about a novel is logical only up to a point. You start writing something based on your experiences, based on what you've read, based on what you've experienced, and then at some point, logic goes away if you're a good novelist, and there is something magical that happens that you yourself didn't know was within you. Now, AI can't replicate that. So there may well be a time, some years into the future, where you have no idea where it's going to lead. But for the moment, I think where creativity is concerned, AI has not made much of an impact.
So on that note, when a story is created with AI's help, especially when we give the prompt, the AI generates content, and the training data comes from countless other creators, authors. Who really owns the story, and how does this reshape our understanding of authorship and intellectual property?
Okay, so that is a really good question, because AI, the creators of AI, the people who are at the forefront of AI technology and research, have run into a lot of trouble with owners of copyright. Because when you write something, you own it. You own the moral rights to it, and you own the intellectual property rights. Nobody can use it without your permission. So they have to get your permission, they have to pay your fee, You have to grant them copyright, they have to acknowledge your copyright, and it's only then that they can use it. So initially, people just fed stuff into these AI generating kind of logarithms and so on, algorithms, and without getting anyone's permission. So now they're being sued. So I think it's going to come to a crashing halt until there is new regulation by the regulatory authorities, until people like OpenAI and others actually start paying copyright fees. You will not be permitted to use those copyrighted content. So it's at a kind of inflection point at this point. We don't know in which direction it's going to go. I think logically, you have to pay for what you use. But AI, the people who are at the forefront of AI research saying, look, we actually are creating content which is, we don't know who's going to use it and who's going to pay us for it, etc., etc. So how can we pay when we're not making money off what we're generating? You see what I'm saying? So it's at the moment in a great state of flux. But I think the law will come down on the side of people who own the copyright, who say, you can't feed it into your algorithms until you've actually paid for it. So that's where it stands at the moment.
It's a very unique take on AI, sir. The use of AI might be portrayed in a negative light in the creative arts recently. Can AI at times be used as a handy tool in the domains of writing and publishing? And then, how would it affect futuristic publications and modern storytelling?
Well, as of now, it has made zero impact, because I think it can help where textbooks and very basic levels of storytelling are concerned, which is basically what I mean by that is very formulaic stories. If you want to write a detective story, a very simple detective story, and you feed in Edgar Allan Poe and Agatha Christie and John le Carre or whoever, you can get a kind of decent, very basic story. But I can't think of a single AI-generated novel that has made waves because it's too early to say. And it goes back to what I was talking about where, there are certain logical things that AI does, and that's why it's of such great importance in very technical fields, whether it's engineering, medicine, etc., etc. There are numerous applications, but as of now, besides writing resumes, I don't think AI is actually very good at the writing game.
Then, do you think AI has a role to play in running plagiarism checks and handling copyright issues?
Well, that is a kind of contradiction, isn't it? Because AI flouts copyright, and AI plagiarizes like mad. So I don't know how you can. Well, what it can do is, I'm sure, and a lot of my colleagues use this. Examiners use this, where they will run a paper or some manuscript through a software to find out whether it's stolen from here and there. So yes, it can help in that way, but AI itself is a plagiarist and a copyright flouter.
So, looking at AI in a positive light, over the years, movies have transformed with the development in technology. How do you believe AI can enhance the book reading experience, making it more immersive and interactive?
Yes, it can. It can. The thing is, but I think, the purest form of reading, you don't need any aids to make it better. You just need your brain, right? Because a writer writes something, but what a book does, a book only reaches its fullest expression when a reader reads it. So you're bringing your own imagination to bear. So what you get from a book is different from what I get from a book. So why do you need more immersive aids unless, for some reason, you don't want to use your own brain? That's the way I look at it. Yes, you can make if you're looking at a kind of textbook, you can have illustrations, you can have kind of multiple. It can take you in multiple directions if you want to sort of look at the way to interpret that text. But I still think the purest reading experience is you, the text, and that's it.
Can we have a round of applause, please? So now we'll move on to the rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I don't know what it is, but I'm ready.
Journalism, writing, or publishing?
You know, you've got me stumped there. But I think I'd go with publishing. That's where I've spent the most time in my life.
Your favorite genre?
Literary fiction.
Your favorite author to work with?
To work with. I'm not going to answer that question because all the others will sort of get after me if I choose any one of them.
Your favorite author to read?
My favorite author to read? I would say Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Printed books or ebooks?
Printed books.
If not an author or publisher, what would you be?
I think a fighter pilot. Or no, sorry, a tennis player. A world-class tennis player, top 10. Otherwise, I'm not interested.
One book we all should read.
100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
That's the end of rapid fire. And sir, we have one last segment for you, which we'll give a set of poems and extracts, and you have to guess if it's human written or AI generated.
My God, okay. Okay.
We floated a form across the audience for this G form already, and we also have their answers. So we'll tally your answers and see which is right.
All right. So I have to say whether it's AI generated or by a human. Okay.
For the first two questions, we have two sets of poems, and you have to guess which is human, which is AI generated. Haiku 1. An old silent pond, a frog jumps into the pond, splash, silence again. Haiku 2. A still autumn breeze, leaves, drift across quiet streams, whispers of the past.
Human, AI.
So haiku 1 is human.
I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
You're right.
Okay.
Next. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. So much lies behind a rusted iron gate, wrapped in ivy's grasp, beneath the waning moon.
One is human.
One is
Correct,
human.
correct. So just to clarify the correct, like in the question we have asked for the AI generated. So the correct one here shown is AI generated.
So sorry. So one is human, right?
Yeah, one was human. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Third question. Watson, Holmes began, his sharp eyes narrowing as he bent over the damp soil. These markings are not of an ordinary beast. See here, the claws are far too deep, the stride too long. Whatever we pursue tonight, it walks the line between shadow and nightmare. So is it human or AI generated?
I think this is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Conan Doyle. I think so. Wrong?
It is AI generated.
Wow. Okay.
But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou her maid art far more fair than she.
I have no idea. Honestly. It seems quite weird, but I have no idea. I'll go with AI because I don't know what it is.
It is human.
Ah, there you go. Wrong. Okay.
The last one. The house stood by the river, its blue walls faintly peeling, but still proud, a testament to the years it had weathered. The mango trees surrounding it were no longer young, their branches heavy with fruit, sagging under the weight of time and memory. In the quiet of the courtyard, you could almost hear the voices of the past, echoing softly in the wind, whispering secrets into the ears of those who are willing to listen.
Well, the writing is certainly better than the last passage you showed me. So I'm going to go with human. I might be wrong, but I like the writing. The AI?
No,
It is
it's human.
human.
There you go.
You're right.
Okay.
The last one was an excerpt from Sir's own book, The House of the Blue Mangoes.
Oh, really? Okay. Here you go.
So, is there anything specific that you would like to convey to all our audience?
Okay, I want to just say something. It's not my own thought. I heard it day before yesterday by a remarkable human being who's a best-selling novelist, but he also is one of the world's great doctors. His name is Abraham Varghese, and he's a professor at Stanford Medical School. So what he did was he set up a humanities program at this school. So initially, the medical students, like all of you, they're all very focused on medicine. You guys are focused on engineering and technology. Those guys are focused on medicine. So they said, why the hell should we read novels and creative writing and so on? We are here to learn how to be good doctors. So he said to them, just try this. He said, your training is going to be different, but that is going to hone your skill set and your brain. You also need to, in order to be good doctors, in order to be good at anything, you also need to awaken your soul. Because what great fiction does, is teach you more about life, which you may not think immediately is what is going to sort of make your career, but it is certainly going to make you a more acute and aware human being. So I think I'm really pleased that all of you who are going to become very successful engineers and technologists and computer scientists or whatever, also seem to be interested in things beyond that, because it will give you context to your professional abilities. It will also give you a certain extra dimension. So that, I think, is something that I'm actually very heartened by.
Now we open the floor to audience questions.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for that talk. So I have two sort of unrelated questions. One, now with the advent of self-publishing, there's an author around every corner, and of course, that's great in that everybody has a platform. But in terms of the quality of books, it also becomes a little questionable. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on that. The second question I wanted to ask is, you talked about your firm's approach, wherein you publish stories that are Indian, that haven't been told. But aside from just tapping on untold stories, I wanted to just ask you what you think makes for a compelling story.
Okay. Both are very good questions. The first is, if you have an option, never self-publish. Because I think the thing about, and I presume you're talking about creative writing here, not engineering texts.
Yeah, but honestly, anything that doesn't go through a publishing manager or even academic texts. Maybe.
Okay, so, well, you must have some kind of review, right? Unless you are like Dante, the great poet, he said God spoke directly through him. He didn't need any intermediary. I think we all need somebody to polish, somebody to filter, somebody to say this is good, this is bad. So I think the quality of writing, because now it's available to anyone to publish anything that they want, it's very rare that a self-published text is a good text. So that is my view on self-publishing. What makes for a compelling story? That's a little bit more difficult to answer, because what is a compelling story to you will be different for me, right? I think it is extremely important that if you're going to try and tell a story, you need to know for yourself what makes for a good story. And the only way you'll be able to do that is if you've read extensively. The greatest writers are the best readers. Nobody has been sort of put on the planet with a skill set that immediately makes them a good storyteller. So I think to tell a good story, you need to be able to sort of, you need to read and filter it through your own consciousness. And hopefully you'll find an editor who recognizes that. And then via that editor, the book is published and then finds an ideal reader. Because for every one of you, the book that is going to be a perfect book is going to be different. You might share tastes, but everyone's taste is pretty much unique.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, sir. Here. Hello, sir. If you had a chance to develop AI specifically for publishing, then how would you go about it? What would you try to include and exclude?
Okay, so people are already doing that. You know, there are softwares, there are people who have, worked out ways in which to make money from AI that helps writing. And I'll give you a very simple example. When I hire people for my company, editors, once upon a time, I could tell who was going to be qualified to be an editor because their resumes were better, were written better, were organized better than others. Today, my wife has just come in, so hello Rachna. Today, all the resumes read exactly alike. So what we do is we get all the people, put them in a room, no phones, no kind of computers, nothing, and give them pencil, paper, text, and ask them to edit it. So here's the thing. I think you can use AI to do very basic things, but the minute you get into a more advanced kind of situation, like say a novel, a literary novel or a poem, I don't think AI is going to help you. You know, because this is what I was talking about in the course of my conversation with these ladies. Basically, I said, yes, what AI can do is logically proceed from what has been fed into it and spit out something. It cannot do what the human brain can do, which is something that the human brain can't explain to itself. If you went to a well-known author and said, how did you decide on this course for your novel to take and not this course? How did you decide to make this character live and that character die? It's something which is, there is no logical explanation. It is the character took over this author's mind and made this author give that character certain characteristics and so on. That AI can't do. Tomorrow it might be able to do it. But today, the AI has not advanced enough to be able to do highly advanced things where creativity is concerned, especially creative writing is concerned. Yeah?
Hi, Mr. David. I have a personal question to you. So, when you select books to read, for example, what's your pipeline? How do you go about selecting? What references do you take in terms of thing? And the other thing is, what sort of genres do you read, and how do you find interconnected niche genres that suit your liking?
Okay, here's what I do. It's a really good question. I'm addicted to books. I've been addicted to books since I was a very small boy. And I usually buy more books than I can read. You know, so my wife has a rule: any book that comes into my house, another book has to go out. Otherwise, we won't have space to live, right? So I look at numerous ways in which to pick up what I want to buy next. I read dozens of newspapers and magazines from around the world. I don't read all of them, but I read the book pages. There are certain genres I'm really interested in, like literary fiction, detective fiction, poetry, translation, etc., etc. So, for example, the end of the year is a very happy hunting ground for me because practically every major newspaper and magazine in the world has a best books of the year kind of thing. The New York Times, for example, has its 10 best books of the year. And there is a kind of book journal called Lit Hub, which actually puts together all the bestseller lists from around the world and picks the books that have got the maximum number of mentions. So this year, there's a book that I think is called it's called James, by a fellow called Percival something or the other. Percival Everett. It's the most reviewed the book that has been picked as the best book by numerous publications. I'm sure most people here haven't heard of it. It's a sequel to the Mark Twain book on. It takes on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So it's an American book. It's got a great deal of attention. So I've bought the book. I haven't read it yet. So that's just one example of how I pick books. I tend to listen to recommendations of friends who are good readers, and so on and so forth. But I mainly go online to look at what people are talking about, what people like. There are certain genres I don't like at all, which I will not touch. But pretty much everything else is very focused research before I pick up a book. And then I sample it. The good thing about a place like Amazon, or if I go into a bookstore, is you can browse. You can figure out whether that's a book for you or not. You may not persist with it, but at least it will hook you if it's a book that's meant for you.
Thank you very much for your insights, sir. Not an engineer, philosopher. I have two very quick questions. Firstly, what advice do you give to the many, many writers you've published on meeting deadlines and dealing with procrastination? And the second one is an AI-related question. I'm curious, especially, you described Aleph work as trying to document corners of the Indian experience that haven't yet been written about. Would you be open, let's say in Aleph would you be open to newer experiments of human AI collaborative writing where AI becomes one form of an interlocutor in writing? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. If that becomes a new form of writing.
Okay. The first one is, I don't have an answer, honestly. How to prompt somebody who has missed numerous deadlines, besides saying, I'm going to cancel your contract. So that's quite a good incentive to finish. About human AI interaction, I've actually not thought about it. I don't know what exactly you mean by that. Is it somebody feeding plots into a software? What are we talking about?
That's a great follow-up question. So what I'm referring to is, it's partly personal because this was an experiment I did for a term paper on an AI governance course right here. So what I did was used a very specific niche large language model as my interlocutor.
Okay.
I asked it certain questions,
Okay.
used those responses as quotes, made it very clear that, hey, this is the AI speaking. And then I made a human commentary on it. So what I was trying to do is a form of, let's say, philosophical commentary sorts, using AI's output itself as a text alongside, let's say, other things that go into a traditional academic paper, like other scholarly work. So and so has said this, so and so said that. The AI algorithm says this. I say, however, this, and so on.
So that's kind of an interesting way of dealing with a creative output. My question to you is, why would you work on an AI-generated text and not just read 25 papers and then generate your own paper?
I think my interest in considering AI-generated text also as a text, I think stems from the fact when I just look at the social life of AI, right? Even if I may take human researchers more seriously than AI, certainly there's probably going to be millions of other people who will probably just go to ChatGPT over JSTOR, for instance, right? So AI is there, it's there. What do we make of it? I think my motivation for that paper back then stemmed from that. It was from a year ago, but ironically, I'm helping build the second version of the course and teaching for that course. So yeah.
No, it's
Great follow-up
interesting.
question.
It's interesting, and I don't really have any great insights into it. I just find it interesting.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing your insights, sir. So my question is, for someone who is around there, like writing bits and pieces on a regular period, but when do they actually feel that they are ready for the book and their book has to come out, or they have to put together everything to form up a book?
Well, it's a very simple philosophy I have, which is, if you think you have something to say and you think you can say it well, then you should write a book. Otherwise, you shouldn't. Just let it be jottings that are for your own pleasure. It's because, the thing is, the world already has so much stuff that it doesn't need. So are you going to say something well? Are you going to say something that's unique? If you think you can answer yes to both those questions, of course you should write. Otherwise, you shouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, sir. Because you're a publisher, how do you discern that this particular book sells well in the days to come? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, normally it will take 2 to 3 years for a well-researched book to come out, and by the time the book comes out, it's a completely changed times, right? So then, how do you take a decision that, keeping in mind that this book will sell well? And yeah.
See, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be richer than Elon Musk. For sure. I don't know the answer to that. I've published thousands of books. And I kind of know, because of my experience, that this book is going to do okay. I don't know which book is going to sell tens of thousands of copies. Nobody does. And if anyone tells you that they do, they're lying. Just write the best book you can and hope for the best.
Hi, sir. I had a quick question. So, around last year, there was a bit of NaNoWriMo faced a lot of flack for their statement saying they would allow AI-generated content for their national novel writing competition.
Who did?
NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month organization.
Really? What is that?
So basically, in the month of November, you meet a specific word goal every day, so that at the end of the month you have a 50,000 word novel.
Oh, really?
So it's a writing challenge essentially.
Okay.
So I used to participate in that a lot.
Okay.
And last year they actually they modified their policy to say that they would accept AI generated content as well, because they believed that AI served as a disability support tool. They said things like ChatGPT can support people who want to tell their stories but can't in the traditional manner. And they faced a lot of flack for that statement because, as you had mentioned, there's that special spark that comes with human storytelling that AI texts don't really get. So I was just thinking, how would you justify, or how would you look at all of these organizations changing their policies to accept all of these AI-generated texts? And where does a human author stand in that sort of an environment where policy itself seems to be evolving to accept these sort of texts?
See, I don't think you can use policy to write great fiction. You can use it to run governments, you can use it to regulate texts, but I can't think of a single example where, because of policy, somebody has written a great novel, or a great poem, or a great play. You know, I think that comes down to individual genius, individual inspiration, individual initiative. So I wouldn't pay much attention to this.
Yeah, because NaNoWriMo actually, a lot of people stopped writing for it because they believed that the value of their work was going down if they were accepting AI submissions.
Sure. I completely agree with that.
Hello, sir. Thank you for your talk. Actually, what you said about lucky breaks kind of really struck a chord with me, so I really appreciated that. I was actually curious about two things. One of them is you've seen in the publishing industry internationally and within India. So, how does it differ within the country and outside? How it looks different? That's one thing I was curious about. And the other thing I was interested in is that we've spoken about the spark which human writing can come up with, but that was more focused on the plot and stuff. But where do you stand on people using it to like rephrase a particular sentence to sound better? Because there it's difficult to draw the line. Like, how is it different from looking up synonyms for a word or something along those lines? So how do you look at it as a writing aid, not for the story, but for the language itself?
I think the first is kind of very straightforward question. The other is a question that actually provokes you to think. The first is I'm very frustrated in India by the ceiling on the market. In America, for example, if there was a first novel which got a front page review on the New York Times Book Review, a positive front page review, it would sell 100,000 copies. Here you had a front page review in the Hindu, it would sell, I don't know, 1,500 copies. You know, so while both will give a book attention and a boost, in America you can actually make a living because you have written a great book and you will get revenue, Here you don't make that much money. It's very frustrating for both the writer and the publisher because there aren't enough readers. Your second question, which is basically how AI can help you stylistically, I presume, rather than inspiration. Now, the thing is, one of the things about great art, whether it's sculpture, painting, music, novels, is both are twinned. That's why I say if you want to be a writer, you need to read like crazy because you need to find your voice. AI is not going to help you find your voice. You have to find your own voice to tell the story or to the poem or the play that is most suited to your creative spark. I don't think you can. AI is not that crutch. It's your own brain. Because say you've read widely, and there are many kinds of styles. You have to figure out the style that's best suited to tell your story, and AI is not going to do that for you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, sir. So, I'm a person who would like to write a novel, but I'm not sure what path I have to take. Like, I have a plot and the characters, but I'm not sure how we are supposed to write the novel and then publish the novel. So, is it like we have to write it down, or we are supposed to type it down, or I'm not sure about the path that should be taken.
Okay, here's the thing. Have you written anything yet?
Not yet, but then the plots and all, I have it.
Okay, that's a start. But my thing is, it's very, very. See, I think the greatest writers ever. Your mind is a very fertile thing, right? You can picture an entire text in your head. You know what the most difficult thing in the world is? Getting that down onto your computer or onto paper. It's never what you've imagined. And the best writers manage to translate what is in their head onto the screen or onto paper almost perfectly. So don't worry about publishing, etc. The first thing is try and write what you've imagined. Because that's your story. All of us have a story. Most of us shouldn't publish that story because they don't know how to write well enough. But if you have that gift, then first write it and then worry about publishing it. Yes?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. It was a really nice talk to have. So my question is, you told us to not go for self-publishing if possible. So as amateur writers like me, I'm just starting on writing. So what would you advise on going to publish, how to approach the publishers and all? And yeah, that's my question. That's all.
Okay, so there is a breed of people called literary agents who are intermediaries between writers and publishers. So that's your first port of call. Go to a literary agent with your text, and if it's a good enough text, then they will agree to take it on. They will then approach publishers. They will take a percentage. It could be anything from 10 to 15% of potential revenues from the book, and they will do the job of going to publishers and trying to find your publisher.
And so, about the potential revenues, so if it is my first book, so how would they decide on that?
Okay, so that's a good question. So if I say you've given your book to an agent, the agent comes to me and I say I want to publish your book. I then sit down and say, okay, I think your book is going to sell, 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies, 3,000 copies, 4,000 copies. I will look at the number of words it is. If it's 100,000 words, I'll say it's a book of about, 300 odd pages. So I can price it at 600-700 rupees. And if your writers get what is called a royalty. So the royalty is usually about 10%. So 700 rupees, 70 rupees is the royalty you'll make. So if I think it's going to sell 1,000 copies, it's going to make X thousand rupees. So that is what I will say to you. I will give you a percentage of that in advance. So say it's going to make 70,000 rupees or 100,000 rupees. I will give you, say, a quarter of that or half of that in advance, because I still haven't sold a single copy. But I've got the faith that your book will sell this much money and make you that kind of money and make me. Publishers and writers make about the same amount, because you take out the costs, etc. A publisher will probably make 15% from a book. A writer will make between 10 to 15% of a book, if it sells the entire print run. Now, 80% of books fail. So, a publisher will give you your 25,000 or 50,000 rupees, so you don't have to give it back. That's yours. But if the book succeeds, then all of us continue to make money. If the book fails, you've made your money, I've lost money, but that's okay. That's the risk I take.
Okay, sir, thanks.
So you talked a little bit about how in India we're not reading as much as the international market does, and I was wondering, in terms of my nephews who are young school-going kids, they have very temporary attention spans, and they prefer, even when they have to read for academic reasons, they prefer watching video lectures or they prefer clicks. So how do we perpetuate a reading culture when reading is now either relegated to the world of academia or deemed as something that's sort of quote-unquote boring or time-consuming?
So here's my thing. People have written off the book multiple times, because don't forget, the heyday of the book was almost 100 years ago, maybe even earlier, the time of Dickens and so on. People would actually wait, because Dickens' books were printed across the Thames River. So they would wait for the boat to come in just to buy copies of the book. He was that kind of a superstar, which you cannot imagine today, right? Because you have so many multiple things that compete for the reader's attention. But I don't think the book is going to die, for one simple reason. It might be a sunset industry. It's not. It's a very old industry, and it's been declining for a while. But a niche of it has its own niche. There is a certain percentage of people who still believe in the book, because there hasn't been a better invention for a deep, immersive experience where you, as the reader, contribute as much to the text as the writer. So, I've kind of lost track of your question, but I think that is why I think don't worry about people who are looking for visual aids and so on. There will always be readers, and hopefully you can communicate your passion for reading to your own kids, to your own relatives, etc., etc. And that is why I think books will continue. I don't care about the format. For me, an e-book is the same as a printed book. It's just a channel to convey a text. Finally, the connection is between the reader and the writer.
So to just follow up on that, do you think the form would change in the sense that we'd go from multi-part series to solitary novels, or from novels people would prefer a collection of short stories? Do you see that, or? Not
at all. See, people have told me, have tried to educate me for a number of years on the fact that because of dwindling attention spans, don't publish very large books, publish sort of shorter and shorter books. I think that's nonsense. Because, some of the greatest books that are become huge bestsellers today are 700-800 pages. Because, like I said, unfortunately, books are not as wide, do not have as wide a range as they did once upon a time. They're still limited to a niche. Okay, and those guys will read a book if it's a great book. So I don't worry about the length of a book, not at all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So in academia, we have a website called Sci-Hub that allows open access to research articles that are behind a paywall. So how would you look at piracy opening up literary fiction or books to people who cannot afford books? Like you mentioned a book being priced at 600, 700, and how would you look at piracy in publishing?
I would reject it every single time. I'll tell you why. For the person who can't afford a book, if you get a book for free, the person who's written the book and the person who's produced the book get nothing, right? So how is that going to foster their industries? If the writer doesn't get paid, why does the writer want somebody to read it for free? So that's the way I look at it.
So I just had a question. What advice would you give a person who's looking to get a job in the publishing industry? Either as, say, marketing or an editor, or in some form who wants to get a job in the publishing industry?
That's quite simple. Look for job ads.
No, I mean in terms of like in terms of like qualifications or
right. Okay.
the skill sets that they would require.
What kind of publisher? Because an educational publisher requires a certain skill set. A trade publisher, which is what I am, which is for general readers, requires a different skill set. Higher education publisher requires a different skill set. A school textbook publisher requires a different skill set. So I would say go for what you think you want to do, which is if you want to work for a children's publisher, you need to know how children's books work. If you want to go for a general publisher who does novels and kind of big histories and biographies and so on, that must be something that you adore. And you, like I say, you need to have read extensively, and then you probably stand a good chance of getting in.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll conclude our lecture. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing such valuable insights, followed up by a very interesting questions from audience round as well. So now I request Dean of Students, Professor Satyanarayan Gummadi, to present our esteemed guest with memento. I also invite EML faculty advisor Professor Basavraj, Professor SP Dhanaval, and SGS Atul Pandey to join us on the stage.
It was a real privilege to be here. Thank you so much for coming, and good luck with everything that you're doing. Okay, bye.
Also, sir, one more thing. We request you to leave the message for IITM community in our EML yearbook. With this, we come to the end of the lecture. We thank each one of you for joining us today. Thank you all. I request the EML team members to join the stage for a group photo.